Welcome to Fearless Females, where ambition meets resilience. Meet your guide, Lori Jones, president of Fidelis Wealth Advisors. Join her and remarkable women executives as they uncover the triumphs and transformative moments shaping extraordinary careers. Ready to be fearless? Let the journey begin.
I am really proud and excited to introduce Jessica Taylor today. I will let you know that this is my personal mentor and probably the woman that I know that taught me the most about knowing my own value and sticking up for what I was worth and being able to demonstrate that. So I feel like Jessica, she's amazing in many, many ways. And I'm sure she'll tell you all her wonderful credentials, but personally, she has been an absolutely wonderful mentor and guide as I started down my career path. And so I'm really excited to have Jessica present to us today and welcome women to the room. Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you, Lori. Yes, like Lori mentioned, we have worked together and our time spent together was so amazing. And it was an incredible opportunity to watch Lori come into her own as she, was making a real big life change. I mean, I'm going to talk a little bit today about being a career changer. And I think Lori was a career changer. Her career for a long time was being mom and raising those children. And when she decided that she was ready to do something for herself and really pursue her own career, she absolutely is a career changer as far as I'm concerned. So like she said, I'm Jessica Taylor. And I am excited to be here and really just hope that I can add a little bit of value and something to your day and teaching you a little bit more about your value. So a little bit about me. I do think it's really important as we talk today that I want to make sure that you guys feel like you get to know me a little bit better. But my personal side and who I am is so much of my professional life that for me, they go hand in hand. And so it's really important to make sure that you guys get to know a little bit about both sides of me. So yes, I'm a daughter, a sister, a wife, a mother, a friend. My childhood, my relationships, past and present, have shaped me. Professionally, I'm an employee. I actually take a lot of pride in being a cog in the machine. And more importantly, I'm a coworker and I value those relationships that we build in the workplace so very much. And I've always been a leader, no matter my job title. And yes, a little bit about me. Personal. I'm a plant lover. So forgive my goofball slides today, but they make me happy. So we just went with it. I am also a trouble seeker. I love to make a little trouble too. I seek out challenges and adventures and, things that just keep life interesting and remind me why I get up out of bed every day. And finally, today, I'm really excited. I get to be a storyteller. I've always been a person who has a relatable story for almost any situation, happy, sad, silly and ridiculous. I can usually relate. And I'll tell you right now, I am notorious for saying that I'll make a long story short, and I still end up telling a really long story. So I'm going to try not to do that today. So you'll have to forgive me as I rely a little more heavily on notes than I might normally, but I'm trying to keep my long stories short. So just to continue on a little bit more about me, I am married with 2 children. My husband and I have been together almost 20 years. And in that time, we have lived in 5 states and moved 7 times, mainly job relocations for him. We currently reside in Reno, Nevada, but I am originally from Colorado. So any opportunity I have to come back to Colorado, I snap it up in a heartbeat, which is why I was so excited when Lori asked me to do this and gave me an opportunity and a reason to come back to Colorado. I do have a college degree, and 18-year-old me thought that I wanted to be a speech therapist. And so I got a degree in speech and hearing sciences. Spoiler alert, I've never actually used my actual degree. For me, it has really, obtaining a degree has absolute tangible value. There's no doubt about it. And I'm a huge proponent of it, but I'm also a proponent of letting life take you certain places and recognizing that a degree doesn't have to dictate your future. So I'm obviously lacking formal education in both of my career paths. And it may not work in the engineering field like Lacey, our previous presenter in this series, or someone, pursuing becoming a doctor. But at some point, it's really important to just focus on what you're good at and what interests you and what excites you and go from there. And for me, that degree has really just propped open doors along the way. I actually ended up landing in the wealth management industry because I liked money and real estate. I left college and I said, oh gosh, what am I going to do now? So I just started applying for jobs and wealth management hired me first. And I said, well, I guess that's which way I'm going. And I was privileged to not only start my career there, but, stay in that career for about 16 years. So I have been working in wealth management until 2022, when I decided to make a significant career change. And I will talk about my career change or status here a little bit more as we go on. But I am currently a chief people officer on an all-female executive team, which, coming from a male-dominated industry like wealth management, and, just statistically, we all know that an all-female executive team is a very cool thing. And I'm so privileged to be a part of it. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention myself as in my community. I am an active volunteer in a community-based nonprofit organization, and it was actually critical to my story of how I became a career changer. And it helped me as I evolved in defining my worth and my value. And as my career priorities changed, I realized it was a byproduct of the experiences that I was having as a volunteer in this organization. But like I said, I'll get there a little bit later. So what is your worth? How do you define it? Well, I can tell you right now, only you can decide. We all have our own sense of our own worth. But I'm hopeful that today I can help guide your perspective a little bit, maybe help you think about it in a different way, a new way, or challenge yourself to realize that you have more worth than you recognize. And then once you can define your worth, how do you demonstrate your value? Value is not a number on a paycheck. Don't ever equate the two things together. It's the value that you bring to all facets of your life, your relationships, your company, your sense of accomplishment, anything, again, that's important to you that, is what you're worth. So we will be talking through the various ways to recognize your value, show it, and how that translates to your career. As I was getting ready for this talk, and I had talked with Lori, and I was like, well, you've heard all my stories. Like, what do you want me to talk about? She wanted me to really highlight how I navigated, my 15, 16 years in wealth management with, raising a family and starting a family and raising a family. And, so I tried to organize my thoughts, which is not always easy. I'm a little bit, like I said, troublemaker, trouble seeker. I go a little, but I wanted to give you guys quantifiable approach to this. So I came up with define your people, define your motivation, define your worth. When you consider the people that are in your life, past and present, professionally, personally, whether you have a formal mentor or just someone who inspires you, those are your people. You want to surround yourself by people who challenge you, who make you feel better and, are part of that growth that you want to accomplish. When you look at defining your motivation, you really need to think about what's your reason to get out of bed every morning. Where do you see yourself in 5, 10, 20 years? You need to be able to know your priorities and learn how to set boundaries. And then when it comes to defining your worth, you need to be intentional. You need to show your value, pick your battles, slay your dragons, and earn your seat at the table. A good friend of mine has this quote that I Googled it and it's unknown, so I'm just putting it on here. But when it comes to especially defining your people, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. And I know for me that the friends and the people that I have chosen to surround myself with to this point in my life have absolutely guided me on deciding and determining my path and my future. So like I was saying, when it comes to defining your people, you need to surround yourself with people who motivate you, encourage you, challenge you, inspire you. When it comes to a mentorship, it doesn't have to be a formal arrangement. Lori didn't start working with me and was like, hey, you should be my mentor. And I was like, okay, I'll be your mentor. I mean, it was very much organic. And it was because she saw something in me and I, in return, saw something in her that we realized the value in fostering that relationship. And, as time went on, I guess you could define it as a mentorship. But finding a mentor who understands your interests and supports your growth, someone who you should look up to. And it doesn't even have to be someone you work with. It can be someone that you know personally, or, I have a neighbor. He's an incredible human and he's doing amazing things in his life and in his community. And I look up to him as a mentor. I want to know what he's doing so that I can surround myself with that. So you just want to be, it can be someone or someone's. It doesn't have to be just one person or one relationship. Just identifying the people who are living a life that you aspire to yourself. So you want to pay attention to how do they speak? And more importantly, how do they act? So their equals, their staff, and their leaders. I was fortunate when I actually got hired into wealth management right out of college. I remember, was it wealth management? It was real estate. Wealth management hired me first. My first boss in the industry actually, incidentally, was a woman. I've had women and male bosses over the years, and they all have their pros and their cons and their advantages and disadvantages. And honestly, I have grown and excelled under both leadership. But this very first boss of mine was a woman. And to this day, she and I have traded off considering each other mentors. When I met her, she was at a phase of life that was about 10 years ahead of me. She had just had a new baby and was, this manager role. And she just walked around with this level of confidence. And she was such a thoughtful leader. And I have absolutely tried to embody her leadership style as I have grown in my career. And as our careers have evolved, her and I, so have our professional roles. At one point, she did decide to step back from the industry, and I charged forward. I saw an opening and I was like, I'm going, I had the momentum. And ironically, she had left the industry. I obviously have left the industry. So, we've stayed in touch, and our paths actually do cross many more times in my stories. So the other thing that you can work on is with your people, being vulnerable. I really think that the most authentic relationships and conversations happen when you're vulnerable. Being willing to have those conversations with the people you surround yourself with. I, early on in my career, found myself frequently having conversations with mostly my female coworkers. We were all administrative assistants together. And, I wanted them to know about my successes and my failures. And as I continued to work through my career, I've been transparent about my income and how to negotiate for a raise and, really identifying that worth and that value. And we can all benefit from those conversations, because never once was I in those conversations and it was one-sided, because there's always the other perspectives. And I always learned something and grew from those conversations as well. And, at the end of the day, knowing you're not alone and can raise each other up is invaluable. So everything I've attempted in my career and frankly, my life has started with vulnerability. I thought about it today as I was driving into the office here and realized that I am making myself very vulnerable today. This is a scary thing. It's a privilege to be asked to be here. And this is not my job. I don't do presentations like this. This is me just wanting to show up and share some experiences. And so here I am. I'm being vulnerable with all of you today. And I appreciate you sharing that with me. So in my career, the first time I applied for a job that I didn't think I was qualified for, I got hired. I was vulnerable enough to say, I can do this. I'm going to apply and let them decide. The first time that I found myself as the only woman in a room, I forced myself to sit up straighter and remind myself that I deserve to be there just the same as anyone else. Being vulnerable to change and, the fear of the unknown. With the number of job relocations that my husband and I have embarked on as a family, that is a huge change and a huge amount of unknown. And, but we recognize its value in our life and in his career and our, family lifestyle. And it, being vulnerable is scary, but it's not something to avoid. It's something that if you embrace it, you can find that reason for it. I think that me being able to choose to start a family while maintaining a career, my career has always been very important to me. My husband has always been my biggest supporter. And so when, my career was getting started and we decided we were ready to have children, how do you balance that? How do you grow your career while maintaining yourself as a mother and a wife and everything else to everyone else? There's vulnerability in that, and that's okay. And I didn't always know what I'm doing. I still don't know what I'm doing most of the time, but I am the first one to come out and say that I'm not familiar with that. Please tell me more, or I've messed up, or I need help. And I'm a huge fan of saying, I don't know what I don't know, but that awareness keeps me open to learning what I don't know. And if you, shut yourself off to learning and growing, you're not doing yourself a disservice. So I don't know if you've ever read Brené Brown, but you do know that vulnerability is not a weakness. You cannot act with courage without vulnerability. So as I moved on in my career, I was not frequently engaged in professional networking groups or similar. My free time was more committed to my family and making sure that I was finding some work-life balance. Plus, I don't actually like those things. So I didn't go to them, but they have value. And I don't want to discount the value. And if that's something that appeals to you or draws you in, make the time for them. And, those are maybe where you can find your people. But for me, in 2017, I got heavily involved with a local nonprofit volunteer group that they promote women leadership and community engagement. This was life-changing for me because for the first time ever, I was surrounded by like-minded women. We were all focused on a common goal that we wanted to make a difference in our community. We were all there as women and, committed to affecting change in our community. And many of us had full-time careers, but from very different industries. Some of us had children, some of us didn't. And there was a huge age range, and some of them were stay-at-home moms, and some of them had grown children. And we came from so many different life experiences and backgrounds. And if it wasn't for this common interest in volunteering in our community, I know I never would have met most of them. But our shared common interest in working together to support our community was a great equalizer. And it taught me that, again, the value that the people you surround yourself isn't defined by their career or what they've done in their life, but really knowing that there is always going to be an equalizer. And if you resonate with something that you want to work on together and have shared conversations and shared experiences, it is absolutely life-changing. And, watching a room full of women support each other and challenge each other was and continues to be so inspiring to me.
Excuse me, Jessica?
Yes.
I was just sort of stalking you on LinkedIn. And
I love it.
Thinking that was maybe the junior league you were talking about.
It is. Yes, yeah, I am heavily involved.
That was only for women who are under 40.
Oh my goodness. It's been a long time since you've heard about the junior league then. They have absolutely...
I've spoken to them, but they were like this chapter, the ladies were all younger. So maybe...
Oh, yes. I don't know when it was, but it's been many, many years that they changed the age requirement but yes, it's the Association of Junior League International, and largely many of the cities that I have resided in have had chapters. And so I am currently an active member of Junior League of Reno, and I am definitely over 40. And it is absolutely, for me, has been just life-changing. And I appreciate you stalking me online and asking, because it is an exceptional organization for, like I said, women of all phases and places in life. So if it's something that you're looking for, getting involved in your community and finding that support amongst other women, I highly encourage you to Google your local city and junior league and see what pops up, because they're all over.
Yeah, it's great. And just one PS, as a 74-year-old woman, possibly the oldest, I can see everybody here in this group, I'm all about not hanging out with people my age exclusively. And yes, in my Toastmasters Club, another group I'd recommend, we have mostly millennials who really, I am a millennial, but obviously in disguise. It's like, and so I love the energy of that other age group. And I always have enjoyed a lot of intergenerational activity. So I just thought I wanted to chime in because of everything so far, which I love. There was a phrase you had about being in the same phase, but then you went and talked about that lady who was 10 years older and kind of contradicted what you had on the slide. So I just want to chime in.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Thank you, Joyce. So again, as we go through this, once we've defined your people, let's work on defining your motivation. Again, what gets you out of bed each morning? I'm not going to read these things. They're just ideas for you. But where do you see yourself in 5, 10, 20 years? How can you get somewhere if you don't know where you're going? And what is important to you? Knowing your priorities will help you set goals and help you set boundaries and know which battles are worth fighting. But ultimately, this slide is for you. I can't answer these questions for you. And I encourage you to write these down and plan to spend some time thinking about how you would answer these questions. Because really, how do you move forward if you don't know where your why and where, and all of those important factors? And I do want to reiterate that I think the answers to these questions will absolutely evolve as you progress through life. And so don't forget to check in with yourself every once in a while and remind yourself of your motivation. For me, my motivation and how I have maintained a family, job relocations, career progression, and myself, somehow I've not lost myself in all of this. It's a lot of factors, but I just thought I'd share a few of them with you all. So why do I get out of bed? I get out of bed because people depend on me, my family, my company, my sense of accomplishment and pride in a job well done. That's just who I am and what makes me tick. But again, my reason has evolved as I've moved through my seasons of life. First, starting out in the financial industry as an administrative assistant to financial advisors for a wealth management firm. And, and as I mentioned in my intro, my college degree, it just propped open the door to get me in my foot in that place. And, they were willing to hire me with minimal experience. And ultimately, I realized I was there for a paycheck at first, but even though I was making less money with a college degree and a grown-up job than I did as a college nanny, I realized that I had found my path, and it was something that allowed me to find my path and focus on it. once we had our first job relocation for my husband, it really flipped me upside down. This was well before the age of working remotely and all of those options we now have. And so I had to quit a job that at the time I really did enjoy and I loved. And I, really had to give myself a chance to recognize that this was a new opportunity and to push forward in expanding my growth intentions for myself and my career. So I highly encourage you to apply for the jobs you don't think you're qualified for. Again, this was another example of, I looked at this job description and I was like, I could do it, but I don't meet this, this, and this, and this. And I just apply. Let them decide. Let them have that conversation with you. Never hold yourself back because you think you don't meet their requirements. Let them figure it out. I was actually at that time, I got hired as an operations manager for another wealth management firm. And they hired me over a woman who had 10 years of experience. And I was flabbergasted and just baffled by that. I said, why would you hire me over somebody with so much more experience? And they told me that it was because I came into the room with an enthusiasm and, this level of confidence in myself and my ability to get the job done. And the other woman kind of just showed up and was like, yeah, this is what I've done. This is what I do. And here I was just like, yeah, I can do this and I'm going to do it well. And, yeah, let's do this, and so honestly, that was my lucky break in the wealth management industry. It was my opportunity to start investing in myself and focusing on the compliance side of wealth management, which is where I spent the last 10 years of my career. And frankly, being able to get into the compliance side of the business was a certain level of job security for me. Because we all know that in a lot of industries, compliance just continues to become exponentially more important. And I was finally able to say I had found my niche and I was excited about the growth opportunities I would have out of that. In my intro, Lori mentioned that I would probably mention my licenses and certifications and all of those things. And I'll be perfectly honest, I wasn't planning on sharing anything about that because at this point in my life, that was then and this is now. But I will say that I was very proud of myself in that role because it did require me to it's called a Series 24. And so anyone not familiar with the licensing of wealth management, I do have a Series 7, 66, and 24. They are inactive technically right now since I left the industry, but actually FINRA came up with a way for us to keep them active as well. So I kind of am 1 foot in, 1 foot out the door with that. But the Series 24 is the one I'm most proud of. It was the compliance specific supervisory licensing. It was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. I failed the first time and I was so mad at myself and my managers at the time. They were very encouraging and they said, just do it again, try again. And it definitely was a license that opened a lot of doors for me into my future. But if it hadn't been for them giving me that opportunity and trusting in me, like I said, it was my lucky break. So, as you move through thinking through things, you really do need to make sure you can define your priorities and boundaries. And I think as women, we all hear about boundaries and we're learning as we grow that boundaries are crucial. And I will just reiterate that. So, you have to know about, what you want and what your priorities are so that you can know where you're willing to compromise and where you're not willing to compromise. For me, my priority in the beginning of my career was having and raising children, and then being able to relocate to support my husband's career. And how do I grow my career all along the way? And without being able to define how valuable my own career was along the way, I would not have been able to be as successful or feel like I hadn't lost myself in all of those changes that we were experiencing as a growing family and, changing states and all of those things. One of the stories I like to share with a lot of people who crossed my path in terms of boundaries is every job that I've had since having children, I have made it abundantly clear to my managers, to my coworkers, to whomever, that I will come in and I will do that job 110%. But because my priority is my children, the moment that I am expected to choose between them and my job, or expected to choose, hey, I have a sick kiddo, or I've got to leave early for soccer practice and have somebody come back and my manager tell me no, I'd quit on the spot. And I made that very clear, usually in job interviews, honestly. And I, obviously that was a risky proposition in any situation, but that was my priority. That was my boundary that I needed to set first and foremost. And it wasn't a threat. It wasn't because I, was threatening them in any way. It was because I knew what I was going to be bringing to the table as their employee and the work that I was going to be able to produce, and that asking for those small compromises and prioritizing myself as a parent, it was just that boundary, and that I would just I would show them my value and they would understand. And I have never, ever had an issue. And I know that that's not the case for a lot of women, especially as they're growing their families and growing their careers at the same time. So I encourage you to have those conversations and navigate it in your own way. Obviously, I'm fairly direct, but you have to be able to set those boundaries and know what your priority is, because otherwise you're making yourself miserable. As we relocated did our second job relocation for my husband's job, life threw me a little bit of a curveball. We relocated just after 2008. So I think it was around about 2010. So the economy is still recovering. Jobs were not exactly abundantly available. Certainly not a job that I had been doing for the previous 2 years, in compliance and operations management. So I was forced to basically go backward in my career. I was forced to go back to being a financial assistant. It was what I needed to do for myself and my family at that phase of life, because I went back to, I need a paycheck more than anything at this point. But I still knew what my priorities were. I still knew that I was going to continue to grow and that this was just a curveball and a little speed bump. I was fortunate at the time to get offered 2 jobs, 2 very different jobs. And I ended up actually choosing the job that paid less because I knew that it had the long-term growth and opportunity that I needed to prioritize my career versus the little extra income that second job offer might have offered in the immediate. And it was absolutely the right call. It led me to working with some of my most amazing and favorite coworkers that I've ever had. And it put me in a position to allow me to slow down a little. It almost kind of put a little pause button on my life, which was great because it showed me that it was now time to have baby number 2. That's why wouldn't you have baby number 2 when you're making less money? So now we're on to defining your worth. It is so important to be intentional when you set your mind to a goal. I always wanted to be climbing the ladder, increasing my responsibilities, increasing my knowledge and my certifications and licensing, increasing my title and my pay. So I highly encourage you, when opportunity knocks, answer. Speaking of baby number 2, I had only been back from maternity leave with that second baby for 2 months when the most incredible opportunity to that point in my life had landed in my lap. Perhaps you'll remember my first manager, the one that she was living her life about 10 years ahead of where I wanted to be. And she was, that person I saw myself as. She actually had gotten back into the industry and had referred me to a job to become a director of compliance and operations for another small firm here in the Denver area. And it was everything that I had been working toward and everything that I knew that I wanted for that next step in my career. Was the timing ideal? I had a 2-month-old baby, or I guess she was 5 months at that time. I was still nursing. I was still very much in just a transition of I now have 2 children. So was the timing ideal? No. But did I answer? Absolutely yes. I'd earned it. It was that opportunity I had been seeking, and my path was clear, and I was going to make the most of that opportunity. So I made the leap, and it was the perfect opportunity at that perfect phase of my life. So once you're able to define your motivation, it'll help you pick your battles. And I use that phrase in different facets. I first really became familiar with that phrase when my mother gave me a little unsolicited advice prior to my wedding. And she said, you need to pick your battles. Obviously, she was referring to my marriage and being a partner and, growing a family and the life together with my husband. But I carry that into my work life. And that's, again, one of the many places where my personal life blurs into my professional life. But to me, picking your battles is knowing what's worth the fight. We all are always going to have situations that we don't agree with, or that we feel like we're right and they're wrong, or whatever it looks like. That to me is picking your battles. So for me personally, one of the battles that I have always fought is I refuse to be left out of a conversation that is pertinent to my job. There are times where you get pulled in after the fact and they're like, oh, hey, by the way, we've decided blah, 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 blah. And you're going, okay, so now I have to do the blah, blah, blahs, but you didn't want to include me in the conversation about the blah, blah, blahs. I can't. I won't work like that. And I had to really stand up for myself a number of times to let people know that being excluded and sometimes feeling like it was just because I was a woman and that for some reason they thought I didn't deserve to be part of that decision-making was wrong. I deserve to be involved from the beginning because I'm going to have input and say that's going to affect those decisions. And if they come to me with a decision that really can't be implemented because of factors that they hadn't considered by not including me in the conversation and considering that I might have that feedback. But we're all just, scratching our heads and wasting time. And I don't like wasting time, and I don't like being told what to do. And when I tell them, you can't do it that way because I'm your compliance person and I'm just telling you you're breaking rules. So I'd earned my seat at that table with them, and they had hired me for my experience and my skill set. And I had to remind them that I couldn't do the job that they hired me to do if I was excluded from those conversations. And to me, that was a dragon worth slaying. That was absolutely unequivocally something that I wouldn't compromise on. I stood up for myself, and I wouldn't back down. Frankly, they were very annoyed with me. But again, don't apologize. Don't feel like you shouldn't take up space when you know that you should be standing up for yourself, and that is a dragon worth slaying and a battle worth fighting. And, at some point though, we also find times where the battle isn't worth the compromise really to your sanity. And those are the times you just have to sit back and go, okay, you do this. Okay. As I've matured and gotten older and had more time to decide what kind of world I want my daughter in particular growing up in, I've gotten better at finding my voice, but I also still am very specific about which battles I pick and, which dragons are worth slaying. And I think as part of that process, we have to continue to grow, right? And so once you know how to define your worth and you know what those, what you're looking for and what is important to you, you have to be able to show your value on the flip side, right? So I was standing up and I was saying, I deserve to be part of this conversation because I have this value. You have hired me for it. That's my role. How do you show your value? You need to keep educating yourself and evolving. I highly recommend reading. It's free, right? We can go online and we can read a whole lot of stuff. There's amazing books out there. There's the internet, right? TED Talks and podcasts and industry publications, whatever you're interested in and wherever you want to grow and engross yourself in those things. Ask to attend and observe meetings or similar that maybe you at that point aren't technically responsible for being at or participating in, but say, I want to get to that point and I would love to be able to just at least see how these meetings are happening and what kind of conversations are going on. And, never hesitate to admit that you're unfamiliar with something and that, you just ask for an explanation. I have learned time and time again that the people who are willing to admit that they don't know are the people that you can trust because they're not there to blow smoke and pretend to be something they're not. If they're willing to stop and say, I don't know, let me find out, that is a huge personality trait. Those could be your people, so I highly recommend, and it's not just a formal education too, right? Again, there's value in a degree, but there's so many certifications and training opportunities. I encourage women to find out what's covered by your company or make it part of your employment negotiations. They'll send you to this really impressive conference that would be life-changing for you in your career. And inversely, they would benefit from. So, I like to say, if you're not growing like my plants, you're dying. So follow those, engross yourself in those. Some other considerations to offer into increasing your value is, like I said, the training opportunities and just exposure into other interest areas in your industry or maybe just a totally different industry. And so don't sleep on those opportunities to just engage with people who are doing things that you're inspired by. Like I mentioned, my neighbor, he does great things. And I'm like, I want to go to this next, talk you're doing. And he's like, great, cool. I mean, I don't want to do what he's doing, but I'm energized by him. So I want to be around that energy. I also encourage you to ask to lead or be involved in a project that might not normally be part of your immediate job scope, but again, allows you that opportunity to challenge yourself and perhaps even show to your employer what else you can do when given the opportunity. When I had to take a step back when we relocated and I went back to being an administrative assistant, my branch manager at the time, she knew about my previous job and my compliance licensing and all of that. And so she allowed me to support her in her compliance responsibilities. I mean, at some point, yes, I was absolutely working for free. And she got this great opportunity to have this young, eager person who's like, I'll do it. And then she just had to rubber stamp her name on it. So yeah, I was working for free basically. But for me, it was the trade-off was keeping my mind in compliance mode and knowing that I was just waiting for that next opportunity. And that was actually the job that I left when my big job opportunity fell in my lap. So it all works out if you just keep your eye on those goals and focus on what those priorities are. Another thing I really encourage, if you're not in an environment that has regular annual performance reviews, demand it. I've been in situations where I went out of my way every 6 months when I took a new job to email my managers and remind them of everything that I had accomplished for them and for their company, and a lot of things that I had done that they probably didn't even realize had gotten done or didn't realize I had just decided was part of my job. And I'm not afraid to remind them and tell them, like, this is my value. Look at all these things I've done for this company and, how I've contributed. And that plays into the annual review. I think in a best case scenario, a good manager is going to be able to acknowledge your contributions proactively. But an annual review really puts you guys in that setting of saying, we're here to share, give feedback and acknowledgement of a good job well done, and also give that space for some constructive criticism too. Obviously, we all say we can handle constructive criticism, but it's easy to get defensive, and that's fine too. But you have to remind yourself that criticism is an opportunity to continue to evolve into, the best work version of yourself.
Just like quickly chime in on a LinkedIn theme, quick, Jessica. Yeah. Because I think you've done such a good job. And, again, in looking at your profile of really, articulating what you've done in your job, I would, however, challenge you, my friend, and I see this a lot because I am a LinkedIn trainer and tutor in full disclosure here, that you say nothing about your current job. And it's been since November. So I think it'd be cool to have you put in a bit about what you're doing in that job and really explain the company. Because again, I went and read about it in the company page and I couldn't really figure out what it is. So I think sometimes we forget in our LinkedIn profiles that our company isn't necessarily a household word.
Yep.
And that also puts your role into kind of a context, and even your about section could tell, like what you're telling today, you could put a condensed version of that in your about section. So that's the end of the free unsolicited advice. Right in.
I love it. And I think it's absolutely valuable. And Joyce, you're 100% right that my current profile of what I'm currently doing is a little bit vague. And it's certainly not intentional, but as a company, we've actually been working behind the scenes on improving our marketing presence. And so I don't want to get ahead of, what our brilliant marketing department is working on. But again, I think you bring up a very valuable point too, that LinkedIn is one of those tools to find your people and to understand that the people you're choosing to surround yourself with, where they've come from and where they're going and what they're doing in a different way. So yes, I'm a huge proponent of LinkedIn, and thank you very much. And I will tell you, Joyce, my CEO of my company is actually here in the room with me today. So she and I are giving each other little eyes right now. So, but thank you. So I have not forgotten the teaser for this Welcoming the Women to the Room session included a little blurb about slaying dragons and how to ask for a raise. But we needed to go down this path together to help you understand that there is no one trick for asking for a raise. I think it's important, obviously, that you know what the market pays in a similar role and that you ensure it's in alignment with your contributions overall. But ultimately, it really, really boils down to you have to be confident. You have to be confident in your people and, making sure and reminding yourself that if you're surrounding yourself with those people that are there to help you identify opportunity and to hold you up, they're the ones that are going to inspire you and challenge you to go ask for that raise. And they're going to give you that confidence to cheer you on and remind you that you're worth it. And then when it comes to your motivation, the motivation that you've defined reminds you of why that raise is important to that next step for you. And ultimately, by knowing your motivation, you can bring your passion and your drive to supporting that ask of the raise. And then finally, as you bring that drive and that passion, you obviously come with courage. It takes a certain amount of courage to ask for a raise. And if you can't know your motivation, to know what is so valuable to you, you're going to have a hard time asking for it. So I've found that frequently, by the time you've learned how to recognize and identify your worth, so is your employer. Because if you're putting it out there every day and you're asking for that feedback and you're showing that contribution and that value, a lot of times, the best employers are the ones who won't make you ask. Sometimes employers might need a little coaxing, fair. So never be afraid to remind them the value of your contributions. It helps if you can provide quantifiable data of where you have added that value to your business. And unfortunately, just showing up and getting a job done isn't enough. That is one of my biggest pet peeves is people who are like, I've been here for a year, I deserve a raise. And I'm like, but what else have you have you hustled? Have you challenged yourself? Have you implemented or an idea or a change that you've proposed? Like where have you added, where have you grown in your job that requires you growing your paycheck. So I think that has to be part of your mentality. It's not a matter of how much time you've done a job. It's a matter of what has that job accomplished for your company, because they're the ones that are going to write the paycheck, and for you. And throughout that process, you're going to find that hopefully it's an easier ask. But ultimately, it happens. What if you have no doubt about your contributions and you've been refused a raise? I debated whether or not I wanted to go down this path today, but it is actually such a part of my path that I wanted to share. Because if you're refused that raise or you're refused that promotion, it might force you to redefine your motivation and reevaluate your priorities. Because, you're the one who's driving your destiny. And just because you've been told no does not mean that you have hit a wall. Perhaps that raise denial is your sign to reassess your goals and your future. And so I tell people, don't settle for status quo if your needs aren't being met. And that's exactly what happened for me. I got to a point in my career where I realized that I wasn't content with status quo. My priorities had changed. I was tired of the same battles and had been questioning if I was seated at the right table anymore. Frankly, it wasn't even about money. It was needing a new purpose and an elevated sense of fulfillment. So like I told you in my intro, my involvement in this community nonprofit organization, that was critical to my career change, because it was by investing my time in volunteering, it helped me start to formalize what I wanted my next step to be. I knew I needed to do more in my career, but after 10 years of full-time compliance, I also knew I needed something different. But how do you just stop doing what you've worked for so hard for? So I did exactly what I did after college. I assessed what I was good at. I combined it with my reignited passion for putting people first. And I started telling everyone in my network, friends, family, fellow volunteers, past professional connections. I knew that my skills and passions would be best served if I made a career shift into nonprofits. But I also really like making money. And we all know that nonprofits aren't so great about paying well. So I just continued to put that out into my universe, into my network. And I committed myself hey, I'm going to stick with my status quo with that long-term job in compliance while I waited for the stars to align and another perfect opportunity to come my way. So a long story short, through my affiliation with a board member on this particular nonprofit that I was volunteering at, I was introduced to a job opportunity that would take me well beyond anything I could have imagined as my next career step. It was an opportunity that would allow me to maximize my 15 plus year career focused on operational excellence, as well as take my related 10 plus years of compliance in a whole new direction. I was offered the opportunity to take over an HR department for a company with locations in 4 states and 170 employees. Once again, I found myself, did I have a formal education or background? No, but opportunity was knocking. And I knew that my years in compliance of knowing how to read and interpret and educate people on the rules and regulations as they applied to wealth management would actually be a really solid foundation for me to learn, interpret, and educate employees on employment law, benefits, and similar. I was offered a seat at the table with leading this organization alongside 4 other women. We challenge and support each other and are so committed to growing our company with integrity and solid business practices. And like I mentioned earlier, I am so fortunate today to be supported with my CEO here in attendance with me. She obviously is giving me the space and the time to share my journey and hopefully, like I said, make a little bit of an impact on someone. And she and the rest of my executive team have reminded me what it's like to be passionate about my job again. And these days I am slaying dragons as part of a team. And I am definitely no longer the only woman in the room. And my new career has re-energized me, given me a new purpose, and is so incredibly respectful of and encouraging of my priorities and my continued growth goals, well beyond. So that's a little bit of my journey. And Joyce, yes, my job description on LinkedIn does not tell much of what I do, but I do oversee an HR department as well as our compliance department. And our company is a holding company. So we own a few organizations that they provide services to adults and children with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So as a holding company, we are providing those administrative support services. We're HR, we're finance, we're IT, we're the development support, so that those that are running our other companies and providing those incredible services to our people and services, they can just focus on doing what they do and doing it well.
So was it kind of like a professional employer organization, but in the nonprofit sector?
Similar, yes. So two of the organizations, we do own them. So they are actually for-profit businesses. And then we do also provide support services to a couple of nonprofits as well. So yeah, it's a very similar model, but just kind of, for lack of a better word, on steroids because we own the companies. So, but, I'm really hoping that, as I've shared with you guys today, some of my favorite anecdotes and experiences, that you're able to walk away with just the tiniest tidbit of encouragement, anything that maybe resonated with you today that you can bring into your life. And, I'm so grateful to all of you for being here and for hearing my stories. And I, really a special thank you to Lori and Fidelis for the invitation to share with you all today. I was vulnerable and I even teared up a little, but I appreciate you guys. And I am happy to be part of your people if you'll let me. So if you had any questions or anything, I think Lori wanted me to ask that question.
Jessica, I have one for you. This was fantastic for one. So thank you so much for doing this. And I'm like such a small town Wyoming girl. I never thought I would get like an opportunity like with wealth management and I came to Fidelis, and one of my bosses was actually another small town Wyoming girl. And I definitely found the mentorship, and it is such a huge thing to have a good mentor, and it changes your headspace. But being in an all-woman C-suite, how do you all kind of bounce off and relay these empowering values within your team? Like, what do you guys do as a team to relay these?
Yeah. So I think as the executive team, we do make a conscious effort. So we are spread out amongst various states. And so a lot of our interactions are remote, but we do make it a point to try to get together at least once quarterly for strategic planning and or visiting our offices and making sure that we're connecting with each other on that more personal level of being in person together and spending that time. And I also think we make a real point of involving the rest of our leadership and frankly, across all of our staff. We've instituted a couple of things within our company. We call them seasonal summits, and it's an opportunity for our various support departments to communicate and speak with all of our staffing across all of our states and all of our entities. And it's a chance for our staff to get to know us as the executive team a little bit better and to know what we do and how we are there to support them. And, I think at the end of the day, it's really just super important and valuable that we're relatable. We want to make sure that people know that we're available. We have an, open door policy in the literal and non-literal sense. And I love it because so many employees don't even hesitate to just pop me a Teams message and say, hey, can you help me with this? And it's usually not that big of a deal. And the fact that they feel comfortable coming to an executive of our company really reinforces that we're making ourselves available and relatable and encouraging our staff to just be with us. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions?
So we talked about finding your people and your mentor. Jessica, honestly, if you hadn't invited me out to those little walks when you could talk to me, I'm not sure I ever would have found my, mentor, someone there. How do you reach out and find that person? What are some things if I'm shy a little bit, introverted?
Yeah. And I think, there's a meme going around the internet these days talking about how extroverts find their introvert friends, right? And it does take a little bit of effort. And I will say that the extroverted person that I am today is absolutely not the person that went to college 20 plus years ago. And really in 2017 is when our family had relocated yet again, and I started working remotely for my previous job, I realized I needed a reason to leave my house. And I forced myself to be uncomfortable. And so and again, that goes back to the vulnerability piece, right? I made myself vulnerable. I forced myself to just find these random groups of people doing things in the community. And I just started showing up and talking to people the best I could. And I think my husband probably would know it the best, but the person I am today is absolutely not the person that I was in 2017. And that's certainly not the person that I was in 2012 and prior to that. So you need to be vulnerable and just recognize if you identify that person or persons or a group or whatever it is, just show up and start just kind of being around and, and ask them to go for a walk or ask them if they have time to grab coffee, or just try to make that first move. And I think generally a lot of those people that you're recognizing you want to be your people, they're going to see the effort that you're making, and they're going to want to reciprocate that and support that, and recognizing that you've been vulnerable. And if not, then maybe they're not the people you thought they were.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for all your time and your questions and your engagement.
Thank you guys.